Welcome everyone back to weekly weather updates, and today we're going to have a look at the GFS, the GEM, the ECMWF, the UK Met Office, and then the ECMWF and the GFS ensembles. Now we're having a bit of a model wobble with the potential for some very cold conditions by the end of this week, or the next week, sorry, into February. Now, the most likely scenario still is to be pulling in some quite cold easterly winds, which would provide snow showers for quite a few areas, but beyond that it's looking still quite uncertain, and even some models, even like the ECMWF in its latest run, is completely disregarding the easterly wind this weekend and this next weekend. So yeah, it's a weird situation at the moment. It's almost more uncertain now than it was this time yesterday. This time yesterday we thought it was sort of a 90% chance it was going to come off, but now it looks like it's backtracked a little bit. But we'll run through the different models, and you can have a look for yourself and see what they're showing. So we'll run through the GFS, and at the moment it's quite a similar pattern to what we've had the last few days, with low pressure running to cold air, some snow on its northern edge, and that's going to run through until about Tuesday, when milder air will sort of engulf the whole country. By the end of the week, GFS maintains the blocking to our north, and it starts to pull in quite a cold easterly wind. Now, there would be quite a lot of snow showers about with that, and where you see that milder air in the southeast, that may mean a little bit more milder in the southeast. However, this big area of low pressure will have weather fronts with that. Where this does collide with that cold air, we could be seeing some more persistent precipitation, which would fall as snow where you're within that -5 line. So again, that's interesting for next Saturday. Beyond that, though, we maintain quite cold easterly winds into Sunday. Start to slacken off a little bit into Monday. Still there, though, Monday into Tuesday. But by Wednesday, higher pressure topples over. And then the GFS is doing something that it hasn't done in many, many days, which is going really flat and westerly with a very powerful tropospheric polar vortex. I really don't think this is going to come off, just simply because of how the stratosphere has been behaving, and how this winter, we haven't seen this at all. This winter's not been one for the big mild westerly winds coming in off the Atlantic, with big Azores high and big low pressure over Iceland. So I really don't see this coming off in the GFS. So I think the GFS run is having a bit of a blip in the longer run. It's known for its volatility, especially in the longer term. So I suspect that this is a bit of an outlier in terms of going that westerly, really. But yeah, we'll have a look at the GM now. Now the GM, again, very similar pattern this week, with milder air coming in by Tuesday. And then that area of low pressure sort of sits over the country before dropping southwards, and we do start to pull in an easterly wind. Now, initially, this easterly wind is quite mild in the south, but colder in the north. But it does look like as we run through, it will go cold for the whole country, whole of the UK, with good blocking to our north, pulling in a bitterly cold easterly wind, and that blocking maintains to the north. And we go into a very locked, cold spell. We see that massive block towards Greenland and Iceland. Big area of high pressure, getting 165 millibars over Greenland. Very big area of high pressure, pulling in very cold easterly winds with bitterly cold air within that. And that would be driving in snow showers. And if we run that back, you can see, especially from sort of Midlands area, we see a good 2, 3, 4 days where the -10 lines through, and that would produce very cold ice days, very significant conditions. And it's very interesting to see that, although the GFS agrees with that for the easterly wind next weekend, beyond that the GFS just goes completely different direction. It replaces this very big area of high pressure with a very deep area of low pressure. So it's bizarre, the gap between the models, even this far out, really, just simply because one model is showing just showing complete opposite. Yeah, totally bizarre. So I don't really know what's going on with that. It just shows you the amount of uncertainty there is, and you can't really look beyond maybe even like 5, 6, 7 days at the moment. We'll run through the ECMWF run now. See what that's showing. The ECMWF, again, is a very similar pattern, and then that area of low pressure over the top of the country, but it doesn't really drop southwards, and that high pressure doesn't really build to our north. So both the GFS and the GM builds a high pressure to our north and brings in colder air, we do temporarily have a bit of an easterly wind, and some cold air gets in further northwards just because we've got a cold pool, but we're not sucking a big cold air from like Siberia with bitterly cold easterly winds. It's just sort of a slight easterly flow, and then it gets cut off by the Atlantic. Yeah, it could produce a snow event potentially, as those weather fronts go up against the the higher pressure, but it just gets swept away, and we start to bring up southerly winds by day 10. We have some northern blocking, so similar to the GM, we have some quite big northern blocking, but then we also have quite big Euro high as well. So, yeah, sort of sandwiching these sort of southerly winds in the country. I mean, a very subtle change in this pattern would produce very cold conditions. If you just look to our north, very cold air is just lurking even 100 miles away, a couple hundred miles away. So a very small change in the pattern and the flow would give us some very cold air. But very weird, from all three of the main models don't really agree on a lot from about 5-6 days out. So yeah, they're very interesting to see that. We'll finally have a look at the UK Met Office run. It only goes out to 144 hours. And as we move through, that low pressure just sort of stalls over the top of the UK by Friday. And I'm guessing, just by looking at this, with higher pressure towards Svalbard, heading towards Scandinavia, and higher pressure trying to push in from the Atlantic, we would at least follow the GFS in pulling, and the GM by pulling in quite a cold easterly wind for next weekend. Beyond that is very difficult to tell, but it does look like we will be pulling in quite a cold easterly wind with this current ECMWF run, but perhaps a bit more delayed, as on Friday the low is still sitting over the top of the country. So yeah, very difficult to see what's happening here. It's definitely looking like there are some spanners being thrown into the works, and it's not really a done deal. We'll have a look at the Icelandic Met Office, looking at the ECMWF ensembles, and we'll have a look through what they're showing. We'll go to the 6th of February, and you can see this is sort of when we got the easterly wind. Most of the models, or all of the ensemble members, are showing an easterly flow. Whether it's a bitterly cold easterly wind or not is uncertain. You can see the operational one has more of a low pressure influence, and that low doesn't drop as far southwards, so don't pull in as strong as an easterly flow. But again, you can see the control and operational run are going for this, but it is a minority option. Over 50% of the ensembles are going for a more sustained and colder easterly wind coming all the way from Scandinavia. So this would be a lot colder with these two model runs, with them building up Scandi highs and mid-Atlantic ridges. So again, the ECMWF operational run is in the minority for next weekend. But if we go beyond that, you see, if we go until the 10th, we'll go to the 9th of February, so we get the ECMWF operational run in. You can see the main runs, or the majority, are going for an easterly wind, high pressure to our north, bitterly cold easterly winds, very similar to what the GM was showing. And then we have a similar majority run with the control and operational run. It's very slightly different orientation, but it's got this low further north, and then it's pulling in southwesterly winds. And then another 13 are going for a bitterly cold easterly wind, and then another 8 are going for, yes, blocking to our north, but more of an Atlantic flow. So again, it's very, very confused. If you add these two up, you'd probably say 28 ensemble members are going for bitterly cold easterly winds. 15 are going for cold, mostly cold, but more low pressure influence, so perhaps much milder in the south. 15, and then 8 are going for quite a mild solution with southwesterly winds. So very interesting to see the sort of the models are becoming more uncertain as we go on, but I suspect in the next day or two they'll become a lot more certain. We'll just get to 1 or 2 runs, it will just flip, and all the models will probably go for the same idea. But it's just really interesting to see that we're still 5-6, we're only 5-6 days out from the suspected easterly wind next weekend, and we don't really know exactly what's going to be happening, whether it's going to be going bitterly cold or not. We'll go right to the end of the ECMWF run just to see what's really what the trend is, and you can see it very high pressure dominated. The majority, and it's very much split the eastern of ensembles, but 13, so you have to say is the majority, is going for a Euro high, bringing up southerly winds. It will be a taste of spring with that. But similarly, you just move that high pressure a little bit, and you get a lot of these other runs where it's bitterly cold northeasterly or easterly winds, and that's what the majority of the other ensemble members are showing. So even though on here it's the majority are going for a sort of southerly wind, if you add together all the other ensembles, although they're showing slightly different patterns and they're not collected together, they generally do show probably a better idea of colder weather in the longer term. So it still does look like February's going to be cold. Just how cold it's going to be, and whether we do see sort of bitterly cold air, bitterly cold sort of easterly winds that we have been looking at for the last few days, is still very uncertain. Finally, we'll have a look at the 850 HPA temperature and precipitation from the GFS ensembles for London. You can see cold to around average, a little bit colder this weekend, and then it goes to around average early next week, and then we do get that dip. Now this dip is actually, even though it still does go down to -7, -8, there are more mild ensembles than previous runs. So although it looks like yesterday and even earlier this morning, these ensemble members had sort of agreed with each other that it's going to be going cold next weekend, they've started to deviate from each other. You can see the thick green line there, the GFS operational run, really doesn't fit with many of the trends. It goes mild for sort of the easterly wind next week, and then it goes colder, while a lot of the ensemble members are trending a little bit milder, and then it goes very mild towards the end of the run. Now, you wouldn't say it's not supported, but it's a very weird pattern, and not many of the other ensemble members are following, so that's why I suspect it's a bit of an outlier. But generally, it does look like it's going to go quite cold next weekend. Whether we do pull in a sustained cold easterly wind, I don't know, but it's still up in the air. But us bringing in a easterly flow, at least with colder air, definitely does look like is going to be happening, at least for next weekend. Beyond that, we've still got some very cold ensemble members, and then we've got some others that go a lot milder. But again, as you saw by that GFS run, it was a very weird run, and I suspect that very similar, some of these ensembles are going similar to the ECMWF, where they just build the high pressure in a slightly different orientation, which brings up much milder air with very cold air not far away. So I suspect I'd count out anything really from sort of the 8th or 9th of February onwards at the moment, with the big volatility within the models. So yeah, very interesting patterns coming up. Hopefully they do sort of converge on an idea in the next couple of days for the easterly next weekend. So that easterly would, if it did come off as the majority of these ensembles are showing, where it gets down to sort of -8, -9, getting down to -10, it would allow for quite widespread snow potential, at least, where most precipitation would be falling as snow. So it would allow some areas, especially in the south and the east, who haven't seen much snow this winter, or the last few winters, could finally see some snow. So anyway, very interesting patterns coming up. But yeah, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Subscribe new, and I'll see you again for another video soon.